agree with Alan Greenspan, we ought to just eliminate the debt ceiling. Oh, absolutely, we do.
The ability of almost every working American to access more credit than they should have been able to masked the underlying fact that lower and middle class incomes were not rising.
That's not a tenable strategy. Isn't now the time to eliminate it? Oh, we've been a long time ago.
Let's put aside terrorism. Let's talk only about our own homegrown animals that are patrolling America right now. So it goes down to the simplest thing. Be prepared, be vigilant.
Good day. It's James Walton with I Am Liberty, coming to you live from a Kia Rio, pedaling down the streets of Central Virginia. Coming to you live, coming to you inspired, coming to you driven by fear. Fear of the unknown. Just another puffy, cloudy August day here in Virginia, and it's gorgeous. I want to talk about Zika. It's one of these things that I haven't talked about, but I'm seeing it everywhere. On the ride into work today, I saw ZikaRichmond.org or something. Help fight Zika, ZikaRichmond.org. And I realized that this thing is permeating everywhere. There's no stopping it. And let me right off the top say that I'm not petrified of it. Though, with the mortality rate in the babies of the infected, that's an alarming thing. We know how that works out, right? See, I feel like many people don't even do the quick math on that stat, right? How many newborn children die or are affected, and what does that do to the population of the world? I mean, when you look at the map of this thing, it covers a tremendous landmass, probably an entire continent, really, if you add the space that it has acquired in the islands and the space that it takes up in South America. It's not the disease, though. You know, this isn't the big one. This isn't the one that the world was made globalized for. You know, when you look at globalization, it's like technology. It's an unstoppable force. Globalization, you can piss and moan about it all you want, but it's an unstoppable thing. When there's money involved, when there's technology involved, these are unstoppable forces that you can't stop them. You can build walls, you can do that. You know what? I put a book, when I publish a book, right? I'll be publishing my new book probably in a month and a half. When I publish a book, it sells everywhere because I publish through Amazon. So it sells all over the world at the click of a button. You know, globalization is the reality. But what we do very well through this globalization of the world and the economies is we spread, right? We have created this tremendous vehicle for spreading disease and for spreading terror all across the world. That's what this global economy has created on the downside. And that's a reality. Things like the Zika virus, it's unstoppable. You get it, So you want to do that crazy thing. You want to do that crazy right-wing Republican thing, and you want to get up on the podcast and you want to say, you see what immigration hath wrought. You see what this illegal immigration hath wrought. The Zika virus in the Miami-Dade area. Yes, the Zika virus, by the way, is in the Miami-Dade area. So if you were planning on spending Labor Day in Miami and you've got a little one in your belly, or if you're planning on making a little one anytime soon, not the best idea. You might want to go to Crystal Cave up in Pennsylvania. What an obscure reference. Crystal Cave in central Pennsylvania. Anyhow, so that said, I look at this thing, right? You want to do the ugly right-wing thing and say the illegal immigrants, they get coming here and they bring diseases. It doesn't matter if they come here or not, right? The Olympics were in Brazil, for God's sakes. So Zika's going everywhere. No matter how many walls Trump builds, no matter what happens, we live in a globalized world. Now, the important thing is to make sure that the government structure doesn't globalize. We don't want one supreme leader. We don't want Ban Ki-moon running it all. That's a good one. No, but I do have nightmares where I wake up in a cold sweat and I think about Barack Obama becoming the leader of NATO or becoming the leader of one of these, World Health Organization, something crazy like that. He steps down and we get the relief of having him gone, and then finally he pokes his head back up on the world stage and takes over some new entity. Not the Euro, not NATO, not, something even more devious that's coming in the future. These are the nightmares I wake up for in a cold sweat and cling tightly to my American bulldog. And just tell Lola, please, Lola, don't let it be so. But I look at a disease like this, and this is a learning disease. People are going to get sick. People are going to feel bad. Babies are going to be born deformed. We're going to have to figure out, again, I got to go back to this theme that I've been touching on, and that is training. Training in the new world. Training in the brave new world. It's like anything else. We can't just be brought up the same way with different risks, with new technologies. There has to be some training involved. For thousands of years, the training was easy. What was it? My question to you right now, if you answer within the next 15 seconds, I'll give you a free nothing because I have nothing to give away. The training manual was the Bible. That's what it was, right? And that worked. And that worked for a long time. The Bible worked for a long time. The Quran worked, right? The Hadith, the Jewish Bible, whatever it's called. I don't feel like thinking about it right now. These things worked for a very long, 1,000 years, right? Thousands of years, maybe. You could argue. And they worked, right? You work hard, you get married, you love your neighbor. The Muslims, they never were really good at that one, but they're getting it. They're working on that one. You love thy neighbor, you do that thing. You had the 10 Commandments, which are very clear. Questions about adultery were answered within the Bible. You knew what things to eat and not to eat based on health risks. Don't eat the cloven hoof and not the shrimp. You can't have the pork. Don't eat anything that doesn't have a vertebra, whatever the hell, I don't know. And you got this very clear training every Sunday. Every Sunday you got it, right? Every Sunday, Dad, come on, get up. Put your good clothes on. Put your church clothes on. We're going to sit in the steeple and listen to, priest touchy-feely tell you about how to live your life. So you would get trained. Parents would train you on these things, And what I'm getting at is things like a pandemic, right? Things like a pandemic were so far out of our training scope. Things like an active shooter, so far out of our scope. Things like the Oculus Rift, right? Having the ability to look into a new dimension. So far out of our scope, and there's no training. There's no human training for these things, right? That we live in a first world nation. There's not people over here suffering from malaria and dying by the millions. So we are very laxed on our management of the waterborne mosquito, right? People flip your tires and do this. Just as we have no idea that we need to be trained on how to deal with terrorism in the nation. We need to have plans, and they can't be go to the ready.gov because not everybody's going to do it. These have to be trainings. People have to be trained to live in this new world. It can't just be by the on a wing and a prayer. I hope that I don't contract this disease. I hope that I can find a way to pull myself out of this new VR world. No, you have to be trained. These things have to be learned, man. And we're missing that. And this is a training. This is a teaching example. Let me put it to you that way. This is a teaching example. A teachable moment, as it were, because just take this journey with me, right? The Zika virus, an unknown virus originating in South America without a cure, without any medicine, and pretty well-known consequences at this point, right? There's some instances of paralysis, very few. What's it called? Insulefi. encephaly. I don't know what it's called. The babies are born, the heads aren't right, and they die. These things are real, right? This is the situation. This is the worst of the worst that Zika has to offer. For most of us, it's a rash, it's red eyes, it's fever, it's flu-like symptoms, right? And it's the feeling that maybe you should have wrapped it up, if you get my drift. But yeah, the management of mosquitoes, things like that, things we need to learn from. Stop having unprotected sex, even though the girl says she's on birth control. That doesn't work, idiot. Well, since when did it become cool? Oh, you don't worry about it. I'm on birth control. You don't need a condom. When did it become cool not to use condoms? It's like we made it through AIDS. Okay, that worked. We kicked that out mostly. Sexually transmitted diseases are still a thing. It's incredible. But anyway, I could go into the PG-13 topics, but I'm not going to do it. But we look at the Zika. Now let's imagine, right, that tomorrow Zika takes a turn for the worst, right? We find out that the flu-like symptoms, the problems with birth defects, the paralysis are merely an incubation period where the virus itself will mutate or metamorphosize, and you'll have something more along the lines of an Ebola-type virus, or something along the lines of a plague, or a terrifying disease, right? Maybe one that induces boils all over the body, some kind of biblical nastiness. If we found that out tomorrow, right, if the first few who were diagnosed all of a sudden developed these boils and they were, bleeding out from the inside, and their ears were bleeding and all their orifices were leaking some kind of fluid, and we found out, wow, the Zika is a lot worse than we thought. What on earth could we do to stop that? What could we do? What on earth could we do to stop that? I want you to think on that for a minute. Would the airlines stop flying? What would happen to the millions of people working for airlines if the World Health Organization came out and said we have to ground all flights for the next 3 months until we figure out what's going on with this virus, this pandemic that's killing thousands, hundreds of thousands? What would happen if the government came out and said that we have to stop the flow of peoples into this nation? What would happen? Would it make a difference? The global economy would go on. People would travel, people would do this, people would spread the disease. And just like Zika, things will spread and spread and spread. And the question is, are you prepared to handle a pandemic? Right? Because what we're learning about Zika is that we can't stop that. There is no way we can stop that. And I think rather than come out and make some boisterous claim that we're going to... Well, here's the problem. If the government comes out and claims that they're going to quarantine, then that has to come under the microscopic view that, okay, well, if you're quarantining, then you know who's in the nation and who might be infected. Which would then lead to questions about how terrifyingly bad the immigration policy is working, because we'd have to account for all the illegal immigrants we know nothing about. Where are they? Who are they? What nationality are they? When you hear the word illegal immigrant, if you're too far to the left or right, then you conjure up the sombrero and the mustache, right? You conjure up the dark-skinned Mexicans, the women with the children. That's what you conjure up when you hear illegal immigrant. But if you are a little more balanced, then you know that illegal immigration is a problem that includes many more nationalities. How do we stop that? How would that stop? How would that little red shaded area that's now touching Florida, that's touching the Bahamas, that's touching Jamaica, that's touching South America, how would that shaded area be prevented from growing up through the United States as it is doing right now, up through the New England states and up into Canada, and then across to Europe through travel and kissing and touching? the globalization of the economy and of the world, of the nations, has caused incredible innovations. No denying it. No denying that. But with everything, there's risks, my friends. That's the way this thing works. There's nothing is 100% safe. And you have to be very aware of the fact that, we couldn't stop it. We couldn't stop a pandemic. So you have to. These are these things, these unavoidable realities that have not come to fruition yet. But the reason people will just laugh at you and just laugh until they cry at you. Why would you ever? What's the deal with this plastic wrapping in your house? So what are you planning for the end of the world here? What are you planning for? The end of times? You think something's gonna happen, do you? Who's the more the fanatic, right? Who's more the fantasy-driven maniac? Is it the person who understands the risks that are presented in a world of billions? In a world of billions who are constantly commingling, right? A world of dissolving borders and dissolving currencies and dissolving morality. That's a good line. In a world like that, in a world where we're all in agreement, whether or not it's done by mankind or not done by mankind, that the planet that we live on is changing, right? I don't think we have to even agree whether or not man did it or not. That's irrelevant. The fact of the matter is the world is changing. Temperatures are changing. Things are changing on the planet that we live on. And if you look back in history, thankfully most of the people die off when it gets cold, not warm. But still, these changes and these events are they're going to be cataclysmic. So that being said, with that small report of what's actually happening in the world, right? I left terrorism out, I left war out because they're pretty much a constant now anyway. But with those risks, who's the fanatic? Is it the guy who's preparing for the unknown, the guy who's preparing for the what if, the guy who is making calculated decisions for the sanity and the safety of his family? Or is it the person who swears by everything and all that it will always be as good as 1990? Do you know what I mean? Is it the guy who believes that things could go wrong and does the proper training and preparing to assure that he can survive whatever's coming down the pike? His family, yada yada. Or is it the person that believes in Neverland? The person who believes in Neverland, that it will always be beautiful, it will always be blue skies, it will always be big puffy clouds, it will always be $1.25 gas, it will always be cheap groceries. It'll never be Louisiana, it'll never be Venezuela, it'll never be Hurricane Katrina, it'll never be any of these, it'll never be Syria, it'll never be Libya, it'll never be, and the list goes on, Ukraine now with Russia knocking on the door. No. In your little town, in your little world, within your four walls, you really do believe that it'll be Neverland forever. That'll be Foreverland. You tell me which guy you want on your team, because I can tell you right now, the person who lives in this fallacy of reality where we'll never run into a problem too big to be handled by a Walmart is not the person I want on my team. All right? It's not the person I want on my team. So I'm reading an article from USA Today, which I was pretty impressed with. I have to be honest with you. I enjoyed it. It was an overview of welfare. It talked about the welfare state and what it had achieved and what it had not achieved. Sort of the ups and downs, sort of the pros and cons of the welfare state that we created since 1932. First of all, I was impressed in how honest they were about everything. There was a substantial rise, especially in the Clinton era. The 96 on. I think it was pretty impressive. It was like a 12 or 20% raise in employment based off of a few different policies, but welfare was tossed in there as well. And it talked about its humble beginnings, essentially how welfare started out to keep kids out of institutions, children without mothers and fathers or things along those lines in the 30s. These children would otherwise have been institutionalized, which I don't know about you, but maybe the most terrifying thing in the world. I mean, is there a hotbed for rape and molestation more prevalent than in an institution? I mean, what exactly was an institution in those days anyway? Abuse, rape, I can only imagine the horrors and the horror stories, and then the orphanages and things like that. So welfare was supposedly put out there to prevent some of that. I think they funded things like orphanages, the government did. But it was an interesting thing to see how in the 60s what it did to the working class. But the great finding that really got me when looking at welfare on a whole, right? We all have our different ideas about welfare. I look at welfare the same way I look at my business, right? The same way I look at food banking. There's a portion of the population who needs help. You give them help, and they're going to get back on their feet and get back in the war, right? Get back in the field. And of course, there's another segment of the population that's just going to lean on that and take what they can get and take everything they can get until they can get no more, and then they'll riot. And this is not a demographic thing. This isn't a black or white thing. This isn't even a race thing. I think there are people like this in all races. I just think this is part of what makes up 300 million people. I think part of what makes up 300 million people are achievers, producers, workers, and, then there's the impoverished. And I worry about that. And here's why. Because the article rounded out sort of the history of welfare with the impressive stats that Bill Clinton achieved through, the earned income tax credit and the creation of a more robust welfare system, but also putting regulations on it. Rounded out how it increased jobs and things like that, but it also mentioned that to date, the number of the bottom rung, essentially, right, the lowest common denominator when it comes to income, right, the people who have little or nothing. I think the stat was something along the lines of people who make $2 or less a day. This number of people has grown over the last 11 years, which is a very interesting thing, right? So the people who are sort of the base of true poverty in America, with welfare in place, with the various governmental aid pieces in place, we've seen a growth. We've seen actual growth in the level of poverty. And I know a lot of people want to push that off on the rich. They want to push that off on the rich people and say if the CEO wasn't making this much money, then the guy making $2 or less a day would be making, yada, yada, yada. Of course, this stat doesn't account for monies that are made under the table. This doesn't account for monies that are made selling dope on the street corner. So there's a lot that this doesn't count, because this is just off data from people who are doing things the right way, which aren't many anymore, right? We look over that information and I can't help but come to my own personal conclusions, and one of those conclusions is I wonder if the Bible said that there will always be, the poor will always exist, right? I don't know the exact line, but it said something along the lines that there will always be poor. There will always be a base of poverty. And in the utopian world, the utopian society, you hope that doesn't happen. You hope that everybody can live a decent and rewarding life. But when you look at a statistic like that, it's almost like there are people who don't benefit. There are people who, the United States government becomes an enabler. Not like as in an addiction, but as in, well, we're not going to do what we need to do because of the fact that we're getting this from the government. And when you look at a number like that and how it's grown, it really does make me wonder about welfare. And I'm not one of these people who says, we need to get rid of welfare. We were on welfare when I was younger. Very short period of time. Very, very, tough time for the family. Miserable. Everybody was upset. Nobody wanted to be a part of something like that. But it was a hard time. It was a hard time in America. That happens. And it happens to families. It happens to the best and the worst. We weren't on the program long, and before you know it, things were back to normal, right? So it existed there to keep families like mine out of a really bad situation, right? Which it did. And the funny thing about it is we got on welfare. We went to the dentist, we went to the doctors, we went to the eye doctors. We did all the things that we never could do as a normal American family because we didn't have the money to do it, so we didn't have insurance. And then when we got off healthcare, it was back to, whatever. And that was the irony of that program, which also makes it, and I've talked about this on the show before, that makes it really tough on people to get off of it. It becomes a little bit like a drug, especially if you have a child with an illness. You have a child with some sort of severe illness or allergy, or they need medications on the regular basis that are very expensive, or they need eyeglasses. And you're making minimum wage. It's very hard to afford these things, especially if you don't have insurance, or if the government, now the government's going to penalize you if you don't have insurance. So that's more of an onus to stay on the government insurance. Stay on the welfare, stay with the government provided insurance, and I don't have to worry about paying for my own, and I don't have to worry about getting fined by the government at the end of the year. But we all knew that was going to be an issue, right? We knew that governmental health care was something that was going to be, it was going to be an overstatement and an underperformance, right? Everyone should have access to free health care in a nation like America. And here we sit. Fines, people freaking out. I'm getting ready to jump ship on my health care plan. I'll probably just join in with my wife's, but if I didn't want to do that, then I'd have to worry about that, or I'd be getting fined. And these fines would affect my ability to run my business, and that's economy. That's how every political decision has an effect on everything. Politics at the end of the day has an effect on everything. Everything has an effect on politics. It's sort of an everything and nothing. That's the way I look at it. But anyway, you come to that conclusion where you wonder about welfare. And I think that the government on a whole, if it's going to be so big and it's going to be so massive, to me it only makes sense. It only makes sense to me that we develop a type of third-party audit for the government. They audit us, right? Taxman comes, audits you. Where'd all this money come from? What'd you do with it? Did you pay taxes on it? No, you didn't. Okay, you go to jail. Unless you're Al Sharpton, of course, then you can just, keep on doing what you're doing. Get some TV shows, hang out in the White House, tax evade, and hang out in the White House. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing here in America. But anyway, so in my line of work, we deal a lot with third-party auditors, unbiased third-party auditors that work off of a certain criteria and report back to you or report back to another body with the results. And I think we've grown to such a massive, unchecked size that it's time for a private entity, or maybe a number of private entities, to begin an audit process on the United States government and the programs therein. Because to me, it looks like welfare has the ability to be effective. To me, I think a lot of government programs have the ability to be effective. But I think they go on for so long unchecked, and what happens is they start to bloat, and they start to figure out how to funnel money here and funnel money there, and they figure out how to raise salaries for this one and salaries for that one, and before you know it, it's an unstoppable train wreck. It's an unstoppable train wreck where we're just sort of working to work. This program is existing only to pay the salaries of other people and enabling others maybe to not do the best for themselves. I mean, that bottom percentile that's making $2 or less a day, is the government helping them? No way. There is no way. They're making less than $2 a day. They can't get in the workforce. They highlighted a woman in the article by USA Today talking about now and then welfare. Is that helping? No, that's not helping. That's hurting. That's hurting because you don't want to wake up every day having a dependency. Nobody wants that. Sure, it's easier, and it might be easier to do. But for the most part, nobody wants that. For the most part, people want to be living a life of achievement and success, and confidence. And wow, look what I've achieved. Look what I've done. So it'd be my proposal that we do private, outside, third-party audits by various different auditors who would audit these government programs, that would audit these these departments. You know what I mean? We would have an audit on the Department of Homeland Security, and okay, these are the things that you decided to do. These are the things that you acted on. These are the suspects that you didn't act on, Mr. J. Johnson. J. Johnson, we need to look at your files for the Tsarnaev brothers. We need to look at your files for the Orlando shooter, Mr. Johnson. And we need to figure out where your train of thought was when you decided to let these guys run around the nation without being checked. They've been approached by the FBI. What was the logic behind keeping these men? And that's it. And whatever the answer is, whether it costs him his job or not, whether it costs somebody else in the Department of Homeland Security their job or not, we report out to the American people. We report out to the American people and say, well, under these circumstances and the risk here, and based on this, we decided that the Tsarnaev brothers posed a minimal threat, and this really was something that we were surprised. Whatever kind of malarkey they make up, we need a third-party privatized auditor to comb through the government on an annual basis and spit out data to the American people. That's it. That is the only answer to something that has grown to this size, right? You take welfare, you look at it, you say, okay, who's it working for? Who's it not working for? How's it working? Why is it working? What can be improved? And we go over the processes and procedures, and we decide then, based on the audit report, okay, well, here's where we can improve. Here's the segment of people that it's not helping, and we need to figure out something different. Maybe we need to give them steeper consequences, or maybe we need to push them harder, or maybe to provide them with better job training, whatever. It's time. This is a radical idea. I know people in the government would probably kill me over this, which is fine. If I go missing, there will be no questions why. There'll be no doubts why, right? If it turns out, I had an interesting conversation with Stephen Gatt from Gatt Energy, who's going to be coming up to my way. I talked about it already. I had an interesting conversation with him about these types of things, and yeah, you know what the deal is if one of these faithful hosts of the Prepper Broadcasting Network or other shows like it go missing. It's not coincidence. But that said, it's time for governmental audits. We have to come up with a privatized auditing system, unbiased, that can't be bought off, that can report back to the American people about where their trillions of tax dollars are going and what they're doing. And that, my friends, is an answer. That's an answer. It's finally come. spread like a wildfire right into my state. I knew the day would come. I knew it would come. Just like the Zika virus that we discussed earlier, the scourge of radical Islam has touched down in Virginia. Roanoke, Virginia. Wasil Faruqi, I guess that's how you pronounce it. I could care less if I'm offending the monster. Wasil Faruqi, Muslim out of Roanoke, Virginia, decided he'd go on a small stabbing rampage Saturday. And that's exactly what he did. He's arrested now, in jail without bond. The brilliant police of Roanoke, though, the brilliant police, the brilliant detectives and the men who are, whether or not they've been gelded or not, I'm not sure. But they came out and said, it's a random act. Just so you know, it's a random act. Yes, he was wearing yes, he had everything pointed directly at what the situation. Wasil Faruqi, he yelled out Allah Akbar. He yelled out Allah Akbar as he decided he wanted to drive the knife into people. And but apparently it was a random act. Nothing to see over here. Listen, folks. Nothing to see over here, folks. Don't you worry. Don't you pay any attention to the man behind the curtain. This was merely a random act of violence. Had nothing to do with any religion. It's amazing, right? I've talked about it before. They don't know anything about the suspect or who he was or what he did or where he lived or what type of knife he used, but they know it wasn't radical Islam. They know nothing about nothing. The only thing that they're 100% sure about is it had nothing to do with Allah. It had nothing to do with the Hadith. It had nothing to do with the Quran. It had nothing to do with anything that has anything to do with anything that has anything to do with the radical Muslim religion that is sweeping the world and murdering on a day-to-day basis. They're 100% sure that it was a random act and had nothing to do with that. He had the robe on, he had the hat on, This guy yelled, "God is good," before stabbing people in Roanoke, Virginia. Stabbed 2 people, right? He wanted to behead them. Didn't work out, right? We're not facile people that just give in, okay? It's not going to happen. But this is how these things work. This is how they spread. Right, we talked about the Zika virus in the first hour. Boom. Miami-Dade. If you're pregnant, don't spend too much time in the area. And when it's a virus like that, there are really nice graphs and really cool infographics and really cool things that can quantify the spread of the disease. But since we live in a PC culture where we're afraid to offend anybody or hurt anybody's feelings or tell a religion that, hey, there's a portion of your religion here that is a serious safety and health risk, okay? They're killing people all over the country, all over the nation, all over the world, all over the map. Philippines, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, what else? We got Somalia, all over Africa, in Europe now in America. And I just, these are one of those giant moments in life. You write the books, you do the shows, you get on the air, warn people, right? Like Jor-El. You get on the airwaves and you warn people, this thing is growing, this thing is growing, this thing is growing, this thing is growing. Take heed to my warnings, please. Protect yourself, learn how to defend yourself. The cowards just keep coming out of the woodwork, stabbing and shooting and maiming. We're the gun control advocates. Stabbing. And what do? We wait for this day. This is the day we wait for, right? We wait for the day when, oh my God, okay, it's finally here. It's in the backyard now. Now it's in the backyard. And there is no denying that the existence of this radical scourge is a reality. It's a reality, folks. It's an inescapable one. This is life. Americans need better training. We need better training. We need better training. We need better training. We need better training to understand and be prepared for the world we live in. That's a small percentage of the problem. How long are we going to go to school and learn this bullshit that we learn in the school system. We come out of the school system, we have no idea how to protect ourselves, we have no idea how to feed ourselves. I don't know what needs to go away in the school system, but I can tell you right now, if the kids have to go to school through the summer, then they have to go to school through the summer. But you need to be trained on disaster preparedness. There needs to be courses in self-defense, and there needs to be courses in nutrition and cooking. Right? When you hit the ground out of 12th grade, you need to be able to take care of yourself as a human being. We have an obesity problem, we have health problems, diabetes epidemic, we have all these issues. Nobody could cook for themselves. You can't tell me that nutrition shouldn't be. What we know about medicine, what we know about health, we've got political figureheads standing up on their high horse constantly talking, free healthcare, free healthcare, we need free health, we need education reform. You need to combine the two, you numbnuts. You combine the two. Right? Free healthcare, free education reform. Every child needs something. No children left behind. Every children left with a cereal box. Don't they understand? Without the ability to produce your own food in life, you're always going to have issues. You will always have issues. You've got to be able to cook for yourself. You've got to be able to defend yourself. America needs a serious retraining. I used to call it rerouting. I'm thinking about changing it to retraining. You've got to be trained to survive this world. How else do you know? Again, the Bible taught us how to get this far. You can throw it in the river. You can burn it. You can set it on fire. You can sit on Facebook and tell everyone, big God in the sky is a guy with a beard and he lives in the clouds. What kind of a fucking idiot are you? You can say that all you want. And you can discredit it, and you can make fun of it, and the Noah, and the Ark, and the rain, and whatever, and Job, and Jebediah. It doesn't matter. What it achieved is monumental. It taught people how to survive. It was a training manual for society. Right? Now, people smarter than themselves come out and they say, oh, you don't need a Bible anymore. Bible's silly. Doesn't make any sense. It's all in a big storybook. And to some degree, you're right. There's brilliant poetry and great stories in the Bible. A lot of it is, questionable at best. But that was the management manual for the civilization. That was the management manual. Those were the manuals for society. The training manuals. Don't kill, you don't steal, you do this, eat that, don't eat this on that day. If this is too hot, you can't eat it. Make sure you stay safe. Make sure you stay warm. Make sure you build a home, get married, have a family, do the right thing. Don't be an idiot. Don't get wrapped up. No money changers in the temple. This shit was trained into people. It was born into people. Then we throw it out, and it's A, B, C, D, E, F, B, solve for X. Some perverted version of American history where the only thing you really come out knowing is that the white man was evil and he killed millions of innocent people. He killed millions of peace-loving, innocent people, and if we could just eliminate the white man, then we would have a beautiful society, utopian society. It's time for retraining, man. And it's not retraining, it's just training. It really is. It's just training. It's training on understanding the threats that surround you. That's what we need. We've got to understand the threats that surround us. It's very important. It's crucial. So very crucial that we know what is killing us. Our diet is killing us, right? Many of us, our diet is killing us. For many of us, it's our diet. For many of us, we're dealing with risks that we don't yet understand. Americans aren't prepared to deal with terrorism and attacks in that vein. Which is why I'm putting out the book that I'm putting out. It's going to be a manual. It's not going to be a biography. It's not going to be the Bible. You know what I mean? Maybe 25 pages at max, 30 pages. But it's important information that I can tell you need to digest, and you need to get your head in the game on this stuff. Again, it's training. It's training. It's that simple. Training. Training. You look at any corporation, any job, any workplace. If the training is terrible, most of the time they're doing a horrifying job. There's turnover. Then they turn over more people, and they can't understand what the turnover rate is so bad. No one can do their job. and they go over their training protocols and their onboarding, and they realize, wow, we're doing a terrible job here. Who's training these people? Right? Education is one thing, but training to live in a society like the one we live in 2016 has to happen. But okay, I'm getting off the subject. We've got the killer in Virginia with the knife. He shows up, stabs 2 people. He's in jail without bond. The cops come out and they say it was a completely random act of violence. Completely random act of violence. He yelled out Allah Akbar before he stabbed him, and completely random. Has nothing to do with nothing. And I sit here perturbed, folks. Because it's the petite mort, right? It's the death by 1,000 cuts. It's the slow simmer that kills the frog. That's what we're in, and I've been telling you about this for years now. This thing would not come with a nuclear bomb in Washington, D.C. That may come sooner rather than later. This thing's not going to happen with battle tanks and... No. It's death by 1,000 cuts. Until Americans can take no more and they start to break. Which will happen. It will happen soon. Mark my words. You're not going... Let me talk to the if you have a friend deeply entrenched in ISIS, can you... I'm going to do a little segment for them. Okay, I'm going to do a little segment for them right now. For the folks out there listening who may be deeply ensconced in this radical Islamic faith, or who may be part of ISIS, who may think that they're going to come and take this nation over, right? They're going to dominate the West, and we're going to dominate the great Satan that is America. Now, I don't think I have too many ISIS listeners, so if you know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, just make sure that they get this message, okay? We are a nation born of violence, right? Let's put all the innovations and inventions and all the niceties aside. We're a nation born of violence, heavily armed, bad attitudes, exploratory backgrounds, right? Rebellious in nature. We're law-abiding citizens currently. But our humble beginnings, who said it best? I always forget the guy's name. We are not descendant of fearful men. And there's a veneer over us all now. Americans now I'm talking about. These are Americans, right? I'm not talking about the Americans that come here for the welfare. I'm not talking about the Americans who come here for relief from their shithole nation, but then all they want to do is turn our nation into their shithole nation. They don't want to speak the language. And this extends farther, much farther, and has a much deeper and wider range than just the Mexican border, okay? So don't try to pigeonhole me. I'm talking about Americans with history in the nation. I'm talking about Americans with grandparents who fought in the world wars and fought in the civil wars. There's a veneer that's been created over these Americans, right? It's the veneer of success and society, and a successful society, and innovation and technology and joy. And every time some madman comes out of the woodwork and starts screaming about "I love God," and starts stabbing people, starts shooting people, starts bombing people, every time one of these cretins comes out, every time a city goes up in flames, right, over some level of madness that's pointing their fingers constantly and consistently at one race, I can tell you that the veneer starts to tarnish. The veneer begins to tarnish, and as the threats are levied more and more. Hang on one second, the firemen are collecting money. Hang on one second. I don't got a lot, my man, but I got a little bit of change for you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, guys got the boot out. You got to do what you got to do, you know what I mean? So, what was I getting at? The veneer. The veneer becomes tarnished, right? The veneer becomes tarnished, and you get nervous, and you get shaky, and you get scared, and then you get mad, right? And this isn't just about white people. This is about people who are making a life in America, okay? And who are threatened by these monsters. And I can tell you the day will come when the veneer is polished off. The veneer is tarnished off, right? The veneer is gone, and the veneer will be worn away. And underneath, you'll have that base American, that revolutionary, that rebellious, that whiskey rebellion, that heavily armed and highly anti-authoritarian American will be there. That same American that reared his ugly head all through history when he was told he couldn't pray this way, he couldn't pray that way. When he was told he had to pay taxes on this and couldn't do that. When he was told he had to keep redcoats in his basement and they could look at his wife and drool over his dinner table. Right? When he was told that the manufacturing industry was going to destroy his farming industry and his way of life. These are the roots. Right? When he was told that Hitler would take over the world and the inferior army of the Americans could do nothing about it. The root of what is American then showed itself. And we show ourselves to be, and this is all races that are American that love this country. This is not about white people. But the Americans show themselves to be a violent and vicious group, right? A violent and vicious group. A terrifyingly evil and destructive group when they have to be. Right? A nation of people who will destroy whatever it is they have to destroy in the name of freedom and liberty. You can be scared of that. You can be scared of that comment. You can be scared of Nagasaki. You can be scared of that stuff. But just understand that that is what we carry underneath the veneer of this beautiful land that we've created. Yes, we've created it, okay? The Chinese didn't come over and create it. No, there was people in this country from way back when, black and white, who created this nation. Okay? And if you continue to allow these animals in, right? This is my message to the ISIS folks. If you little monsters continue to come into the nation, you continue to incite violence, then you will be exposed to the core of what America is, the root of Americans. And you will see the ugly. You will see the viciousness and the terrifying behavior of the post-9/11 American. You will push the government and the army and the military to do things that you would have prayed they never would do. I can promise you this. I can promise you that these radical mosques will be rooted out, whether by government agency or by something else. Because we won't live in fear. We never have. That's the takeaway, my little radical Muslim friends, my little clerics, my little filthy, rotten, stinking, hiding behind your little book. This is what you can create, right? You can create a whole country of vigilantes that are going to burn your mosques down and terrorize your people because you can't figure out that you have to get along with your neighbor. That's all. You can do your little head bow and you can do your celebration of Allah in your living room. But if you keep forcing it, if you keep pressing people to submit, and if you keep stabbing and cutting and raping, then you're going to see the ugliness that is inherent in us all. Never forget, we crossed the icy waters of the Delaware on Christmas to slaughter the Hessians in their sleep. These are the people that you're prodding. These are the people that you're poking and prodding. And you're going to awaken a beast. And you're going to wish that it never happened. And I can tell you right now, this minimal group, this small, tiny group of guerrillas, right, who are coming out of the woodwork to cause these little atrocities. Once you wake up the American animal, the American spirit, you better hold on tight, okay? So tell your friends, hold on tight.